My name is Lena Meari. I was born in Haifa to a refugee family from Al-Birwi village, which was destroyed by the Zionist forces in 1948. My research interests focus on anti-colonial struggles, revolutionary movements, decolonial feminist thought and methodologies, and the formations of revolutionary subjectivities. Since 1967, about 1 million Palestinians have been arrested and interrogated by Israel. So this figure constitutes approximately 20% of the total Palestinian population in the 1967 occupied Palestinian territory and 40% of the Palestinian males. Political imprisonment and torture are intimately linked to the nature of colonial regimes. During anti-colonial liberation struggles, such as in the Algerian decolonial war against French colonization, for example, between 1954 to 1962, torture becomes the routine of the colonial state's terrorism and part and parcel of the army's defense of the continuation of colonial domination. In the Palestinian colonial context, mass incarceration and systematic physical psychological torture of Palestinians has been employed as a primary colonial technique, aiming at spreading terror, preventing and suppressing any form of anti-colonial opposition to the Zionist settler-colonial project. The interrogation techniques take place mainly through the total isolation of the activists by prolonged ban on attorney visits and the deployment of physical, psychological torture, including successive days of sleep deprivation, the arrest of family members, and physical pressure by forcing detainees into stressful positions for long periods. These techniques aim to obtain confessions, extract information, recruit collaborators, form submissive subjects, and destroy the will to resist. Within the Israeli colonial regime, all colonial states' apparatuses are implicated in the torture of Palestinian political prisoners, from the court system and the judges who extend the period of the interrogation and the ban on attorneys' visits, despite knowing that the prisoner is subjugated to cruel interrogation techniques. Sumud is a Palestinian anti-colonial mode of being. In the face of the Zionist violent colonial domination that penetrates every aspect of Palestinians' lives, Sumud means the refusal to surrender. Sumud can be approximated as a Palestinian mode of restructuring oneself in a colonial reality. The notion of Sumud is constantly invoked by Palestinians when referring to how they relate to the Palestinian just cause. Palestinians who survived expulsion by Zionist forces in 1948 and were dispossessed of their lands during and after the Nakba refer to their survival as a manifestation of Sumud. During the first Intifada in 1987, Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza Strip initiated microeconomic projects to boycott Israeli products to support what they referred to as Sumud economy. During the second Intifada in 2000, Palestinians who had to cross military checkpoints on daily basis also viewed their crossing as a manifestation of Sumud. And numerous Palestinian institutions and organizations throughout Palestine and in exile use the term Sumud in their names. And it appears also in several Palestinian and Arab popular songs and poetry. So Sumud can be considered as something that fills the air that Palestinians inhale. Sumud for Palestinians is a political being and a continuous engagement with the flows and the constraints of the colonial situation that endows Palestinians with forces to endure their lives through and in opposition to the colonial practices. Specifically in the context of the interrogation, Sumud signifies the refusal to confess by refraining from revealing information to Shabak interrogators, despite the cruelty of the physical and psychological torture employed by the interrogators. So this refusal to confess involves the flesh and blood of the Palestinians subjected to the harsh interrogation techniques. And in an enactment of Sumud, the Palestinian voluntarily endures the suffering of the continual torture to protect the secrets regarding the self, the comrades, the political organization, and the resistance movement. Yet the paths to practicing Sumud are as numerous as there are Palestinians in Sumud or who practice Sumud. And Sumud in this sense is a formation of revolutionary subjectivity, which is constantly engaged in restructuring the self in the context of not recognizing or surrendering to power structures through a connective relation to the community of strugglers and the community at large. And Sumud engages relationality, collectivity, imagination, and affects in a way that destabilizes the rational conception of politics. Political captivity in Palestine is a colonial technique to form docile subjects that are receptive of the colonial regime and the colonial relations. The interrogation techniques and the cruel physical and psychological torture should not be framed as a violation to Palestinians' human rights, to be opposed through legal means. Political captivity becomes a site for confronting and resisting the colonists. So the prisoners' movement realized that its role is to confront the prison authorities and to invert Israeli colonial prisons into revolutionary castles, resistance spaces, and popular universities. So from within the walls of prisons and its harsh material conditions, the community of Palestinian captives invented creative means to develop an educational system, organizational structures, and communication networks within and beyond the colonial prisons. So the Palestinian captive movement constituted itself as a crucial part of the Palestinian revolutionary forces. These achievements were gained through a very long process of struggle. Sumud, however, continues to haunt the post-Oslo liberal formations, and also to face it, the Shabak interrogators recently resorted to deadly techniques in their interrogation, in addition to heavily resorting to the arrest and torture of the family members of the Palestinians in order to dominate and fail their Sumud. Whenever there is like oppression, it will invoke its negation. So despite the apparent success of the colonial regime in dominating the colonized Palestinians, specifically like during the post-Oslo era, anti-colonial resistance will rise up, and I think it will be accompanied by new creative forms and practices.